Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Sports Exchange. My name is Scott Morgenroth, along with Louis Adio Weiss. Hello, Louis.
How's it going, Scott?
I'm doing great. Well, we had a busy show tonight, and we're going to lead off with South Florida Tribune columnist Jason Prock. Jason, welcome back to the show. I know that we worked together another lifetime ago on another network, but we're glad to have you on board this evening and in future shows.
Scott, Louis, thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to it.
All right, well, obviously, the Baseball Hall of Fame announcer inductions, and we're going to go ahead and talk about a few things that came to mind as you wrote a story for the South Florida Tribune. Go ahead, and why don't you start with Larry Walker getting in?
Yeah, if you look at the career of Larry Walker, he came up through Canadian organization. To go back to his younger years, he wasn't even a baseball player. He was in hockey. So, but he started out in Montreal right around 1989, signed $1,500 contract. And if you take a look at his career, he only played 5 years for Montreal. But right around 1994, they had a 74-40 win team. And he had players around him, kind of like a Moises Alou. He had pitching like Randy Johnson. He had those players that kind of catapult him too as well in the lineup. And I think that really, really matters in a team. And you can see it, like an Edgar Martinez who just got into the Hall of Fame last year in 2019. And he definitely definitely helps you in a lineup. So, but if you really take a look at this, Scott and Louis, Larry Walker, he let's see here, his percentages. In 2011 he was at 10%. He was really low the last 10 years. And then he just took a shot right up there in about 2014. He went up to 21.9, and then eventually a 54.6 in 2019. And then this year he jumped up to 76%. So, him to actually get in, it took him this long, you guys.
Well, his leaps, like you're indicating, were giant leaps. I mean, 10 to 20, and then, of course, 22% or so to get into the Hall of Fame is impressive. So you're really on target there. I think a lot of that was attributed to the Colorado/Coors Field effect, where many people feel that his numbers were inflated because of where he went ahead and played. But thankfully, he does get in, and I'm glad that he actually is wearing a Colorado cap to go in as well.
Yeah, you know what? I was going to add, you guys, in 1997, his MVP, he had 49 home runs, 29 of them were on the road. So, I debate a lot of these guys and these writers who didn't want to vote him in. And right around that timeline, he had so much career number. He had so many great career numbers on the road. He batted on the road 278, a career average, with a 495 slugging percentage. So, I mean, in only 1,988 games, posted 383 home runs. His WAR was just a bit better than Derek Jeter's, even though he only played 4 years less than him, attributed to his injuries. But I think it really needs to be accounted for how good and how clutch of a hitter he was on the road, guys.
Yeah, his slash line on the road is still pretty solid. I believe the on base is near 370. And again, like if you can get on base 37% of the time, you're going to be a Hall of Famer, or at least pretty close. I get the beauty of WAR in Larry Walker's case and why the analytics really helped him is that it adjusts for ballpark. And not many people know this, but it takes into account ballpark factors such as the way pitchers pitch there and hitters hit. So to know that he was that much more valuable, and again, we haven't even discussed how great of a defender he was, but I'm very glad, like Scott said, I'm very glad that Larry Walker's in the Hall of Fame. I think it should have happened a long time ago. I'm just glad that a lot of people were able to change their minds on this because he's not only is he one of the great characters in baseball history. I mean, he's one of the more complete players who he's almost like a Sandy Koufax in the sense where he was so great, but we wish we saw more because he missed so much time due to injury. And Koufax, again, obviously had to retire prematurely due to a shoulder injury.
Yeah, good point, Lewis. And not only that, what people have to understand, he is a Canadian. There's only two Canadians that have been actually now in the Hall of Fame when you talk about Ferguson Jenkins, and now Larry Walker. And, he could have easily played hockey, but opted to go ahead and play baseball.
One of my favorite notes about Larry Walker, too, is his obsession with the number 3. And I'll point this out. This is pretty funny. He got married at 333. He wore 33 with every team that he played for. And, Scott, would you guess what number selection to the Hall of Fame he was?
Yeah,
he will be the 333rd number.
I know. I saw that. I tweeted that.
Baseball is a beautiful game, even off the field. It does funny things like that.
Yeah, I tweeted that. But, yeah, okay. So you're throwing something at me that I'm not surprised with so I can get it right, okay? But 33 is my favorite number, so Larry, GMTA, great minds think alike.
There you go.
And to be a little bit clear on that percentage, it was 10% 2011 and jumped all the way to a 34 in 2018. It didn't look like he was going to get in, and then the last 2 years with just how everything worked out in both of the Hall of Fame, so last year, it just ended up working out for him. So you can't be any more happy for Larry Walker, really.
Okay, let's go on to Derek Jeter. The guy is 1 vote shy of unanimous. Does that bother you?
You know what? No, it doesn't really bother me. I think everyone has a sporting opinion to themselves, and I think it gives some people something to talk about, and I just think that it's so something just kind of sparks it a little bit, where you always have that one person who doesn't agree with it, But I mean, he was going to get in. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer. 1996 Rookie of the Year. He actually had 3 hits in 2 All-Star games. I don't know if you knew that. 2000 and 2004.
The only one that's going to get bothered by it is when they sniff out the writer who didn't do it. And the only thing that I can say about Jeter is it's too bad that one of the All-Star games he did not make was at Comerica Park in Detroit because he's a Kalamazoo kid.
I can't believe. Yeah, you know
that's
what?
That's too surreal, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, something that it is, especially you wouldn't think you would miss that for the world, but you know what, that kind of happens sometimes, and then you see a lot of professional players get held out of games, and you wouldn't think that would happen to a hometown guy like him.
Yeah, sports has a very mysterious way of working things out. However, they're meant to be, whether in Hollywood, Detroit, New York, etc. Okay, so now that we've talked about those things, I'll give you an opportunity to elaborate on the thing you want to talk about, and probably many people will talk about over the course of the next 12 months, and that's Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, who didn't make much of an increase. Lewis was about a couple of percent.
They went from about 59 and 58.8 respectively to 68.7 and 61. But again, there's still 2 years. You and me were talking about this on Tuesday's show. We think that the weak ballot's coming up, and again, you have first-year guys coming up like Alex Rios, Tim Hudson, who has a better case than most think, and Mark Burley, but they're not guys that you're going to think slam dunk. When I think Tim Hudson, I think of Andy Pettitte almost as a guy who's sinker slider. A lot of his metrics kind of add up to Andy Pettitte's. They'll benefit from a weak ballot, which will kind of aid in their case. I mean, I wrote a piece that'll be up on the South Florida Tribune tomorrow, which you can find at Tribune South on Twitter. Give us a follow there, where I'm writing about the Hall of Fame case for Scott Rowland, who got a boost. These weak classes coming up are going to benefit guys like Vizquel, who I don't think belongs, but it'll also benefit guys like Rowland, who got a boost this year, Andrew Jones, Bonds, and Clemens. So we could see in what projects to be a pretty dark era for Hall of Fame voting, because we don't know really what's going to happen. Guys like Bonds and Clemens, the narrative may shift a little bit where they get enough to where they, they're finally going to get in.
Yeah, Billy Wagner, he was 31%.
He got a boost too, and I think that his case is stronger than Trevor Hoffman's and Mario, and guys like Bruce Sutter, just because of how dominant he was. But he's also like Larry Walker, where when you saw Billy Wagner pitch, you're like, this is a Hall of Fame kind of pitcher. He just wasn't on the field enough, and then his postseason numbers, as brief as they are, aren't pretty ERA over 10. So that kind of hurts him. But again, the ballot's so free. Like, we have guys that are the carryover guys are the ones who present more compelling cases than the ones who are coming up in the future. I don't think it's really going to be until Adrian Beltre that you're going to see another guy, and Beltre won't be eligible until 2024, where you're going to see a guy you're like, that's a Hall of Famer. And Adrian Beltre will be one of those guys.
Well, that's true, but here's the thing that we have to understand, okay? And we're talking about something like the writers, okay? The writers, do they want Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens in next year, or are they willing to stick it to these guys? You know what, Jason Prock, you're going to go ahead and give me your opinion on that.
Oh, you know what? I'll tell you this. You know, if you're going to give these guys the MVP, then you're going to have to give everybody else, you know, the Rafael Palmeiros and stuff like that.
But go
you know,
that far.
I'll tell you this. Roger Clemens had a 24-4 year his rookie year, and he had a 0.96 whip. You know, that's when the Roger Clemens he won. He's not like a 12-time Cy Young winner for nothing.
Seven Cy
and,
Youngs, yeah.
But I think people are going to take that in regards because of the timeline he did play in. But it's going to be hard. It's going to be interesting to see in the next 2 years if they can just bump up that 15% title for those 2 years. It's on an average of 7% more on a vote. So, you know something, I just don't see it. I mean, I just don't see it. You know, that's my opinion. I don't see that they will be able to get voted in. But
next year you're talking about. Yeah, I think the writers are determined to keep these two guys out. I've got a lot of guys that are baseball writers, and the information I get is they're steadfast to keep these two guys out. So, you know, maybe next year, maybe they go from 60 to 65%, which keeps them maybe 10%. And in that final year, anything can happen, as we saw, which was the case with Larry Walker, where he bumped 20%. But the thing about Walker, he's a nice guy, and he was consistent for a long time. And he played for franchises that weren't overly that great. Mm-hmm. The Montreal Expos and the Colorado Rockies aren't considered great baseball towns. Well, Montreal isn't one anymore, and Colorado is Colorado, and then he only had St. Louis, and that was, what, a year and a half?
2 years, but he was still very productive there. Again, it was just...
Well, right, I know that, but of the three baseball towns that he played in, St. Louis may have been the best baseball town overall, but he was there the least amount of time. That's where I'm going with this.
Yeah, and you can argue he would have a pretty good Hall of Fame case if he played most of his career in St. Louis because of the baseball town it is. It's a town steeped in tradition. Back to Bonds and Clemens real quick, though, because I think you touched on something really interesting. Some writers don't want them in, and this is the way that I see it. Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, if they were students in school and they were taking a test, and I thought of this analogy yesterday because I was talking about it with one of our fellow writers, Omar, who I recently, got to working with at the Tribune. And I told him this, if they were taking a test, you look at their numbers pre-steroids, this is them not cheating, right? And, using performance enhancers. Barry Bonds is one of the 10 greatest players in baseball history, his first 15 years without steroids. You already have like a 95 on the test, so you're going to try to cheat and get 100 and, help yourself even more. Clemens the same way, too. He won multiple Cy Young Awards. He won 4 with Boston. I think he won 2 with Toronto. I don't know, he won a couple with Boston, a couple with Toronto, and then he won a few with the Yankees, one with the Astros, but that's not the point. The thing that upsets me, and personally I think they're Hall of Famers, and what I think some writers are thinking, they agree that they're Hall of Famers before steroids, and I'm sure you would agree with that as well, because if you look at their career, it doesn't take a genius to know that black ink means they led the league in a lot of things. But why would you want to chase after certain records? Obviously, Clemens surpassed Carlton's strikeout record. It wasn't the all-time record, but he wanted to be up there. But why would you want to further place yourself in the conversation, among the all-time greats statistically, when you already have a Hall of Fame pedigree? And if you look at the way that Bonds was trending before his 4-year peak in 01 to 04, which is one of maybe the greatest run of hitting ever, he was still an all-star MVP caliber player. That's what I think a lot of writers are conflicted on. But at the end of the day, when you really look at it, Bonds was playing against guys that were on steroids, and his numbers, because most of the league at that time was doing it, his numbers in OPS plus, and a metric I'm sure you're familiar with, Jason, of 256, the greatest 4-year OPS plus run in baseball history, the greatest 4-year run of hitting in baseball history. So even if Barry Bonds was on steroids, then those numbers are so ridiculous in regards to what he did that, you know what, some guys aren't going to like it because of how inflated they are, but at the same time, he was still better than everybody when he wasn't on it.
Well, yeah, but let me point out one thing that you're failing to mention, and Jason, you can chime in on this